Hello, good morning, students. I welcome you to this class of literature. Today I am going to take up the novella Animal Farm with you. Before I take up this novel with you, let me first share with you the events that compel the writer to write this novel. Actually, this Animal Farm is written in the backdrop of Russian Revolution of 1917. Okay, before this revolution or before Russian Revolution of 1917, Russia was under the control of Tsar Nicholas II, and the working class, especially the peasants, workers, the laborers, they were leading a very tough life under the regime of Nicholas II. Heavy taxes were imposed on them, and even the reward of labor of their labor was not paid. So they were leading a very tough life. So they came, you can say, under the influence of revolutionaries, and a revolution took place, in simple words. And the Tsar Nicholas II was his regime was thrown out. Okay, and a new regime came into being. It is based on the principle of Marxism. Now, before we go further, we must know what Marxism is. Marxism is basically an economic theory propounded by Karl Marx, a German philosopher. Marx divides society into two classes, uh, haves and have nots. Haves they own means of production, have nots they are poor, they are underprivileged, and they don't have control over the economic resources. That's why they are denied their rights, because they were exploited by those who have means of those who control the means of production. So Marx has given this theory in which he has clearly stated that those who control the means of production or economic resources, they exploit those who are unfortunately denied these benefits, or those who do not have access to economic resources or means of production. So when the working class will unite and it will revolt against the elite class or the ruling class or those who own means of production, only then the lot of the working class will change. Okay, so even Marx calls for a revolution. So these were the principles on which Russian Revolution took place. The revolutionists, they grouped together and revolted against the dictatorial regime of Tsar Nicholas II, and he was thrown out of Russia. So a new regime came into being, and when this new regime came into being in Russia, it for some time it worked on the principles of Marxism. It tried to implement the principles of Marxism or the philosophy of Marx, but eventually it strayed away from its principle, and the leaders became corrupt. They became corrupt and brute, and they concentrated powers in their hands and started exploiting their own people. So the high ideals on which the revolution was based, they were lost, and the people were again back to the square one. Okay, so people were again leading tough life, they were again leading miserable life, and the values on which the foundation of the revolution was based, they were completely lost. So this writer George Orwell, he has tried to styrize the corruption that engulfs the high ideals of the revolutionaries, who who promises to who promise to end exploitation of the masses, but they started exploiting their own men. So this novel is makes fun of the great leaders of revolution who promised to end the miseries of the people, but at the end of the day they started exploiting their own masses. Now, when this novel begins, we are introduced to two major characters in the chapter one. One is Mr. Jones, and the other is uh, old Major. Mr. Jones is a human being. He's a master of the manor form, but he is a bad guy. He's a foolish drunkard, and he doesn't take care of his animals, and animals are not happy with him. Old Major is a senior pig in the manor form, and he's a very wise man, and he knows the root cause of the misery of the animals living in the animal form. So one day he makes an impassionate speech to the animals and told them that the root cause of their problem is man. Therefore, we have to rebel against man. We have to revolt against man. Unless we revolt against man, we cannot put an end to our misery. So, in other words, he instigates animals of the animal form to revolt against Mr. Jones to break the chains of slavery. So, what old Major says in his speech is nothing but a reiteration of the principles of Marxism. Okay, he says that a man doesn't produce anything, but he claims everything. And when animals become, you can say, useless for him, he either sends them to butcher, or he either sell them off. Okay, so he makes a very strong speech in which he pitches for a revolution and motivates animals to revolt against man. And he says that he is going to die very soon, but he knows that if revolution takes place, it will end misery of animals. It will end their misery. And now what happens? This speech leaves a very big impact on the animals, and the animals, they are already fed up with Mr. Jones, and one day they revolted against him, and Mr. Jones was thrown away or driven out of the animal form. So the animals were very happy that they had succeeded in their mission. Now there will be a permanent end to their misery, and misery because the new government is their own government. And now what happens when Mr. Jones is driven out of the animal form? The reign of the animal forms, they were taken over by this man, Napoleon, the wisest pig. Okay, because old Major has already died. So Napoleon, assisted by other pigs, especially Snowball, they took charge of the animal form, and they framed certain rules. These rules are called animalism, and they are broadly termed as 7 commandments. They are broadly termed as 7 commandments, and they are, again, these commandments are nothing but the reiteration of the principles of Marxism. Okay, and now these 7 commandments were painted on the wall of the animal form, and animals were educated in this regard also. A few animals showed interest in these principles. A few tried to learn how to read and write, but most of the animals do not show any interest in reading and writing. So new government, a government of the animals, has taken over the charge of the animal form. Now what happens when this new government takes charge over there? uh, Napoleon started consolidating his position. Snowball, who is the wisest pig, wants to set up committees to improve the functioning of the animal form, and he set up certain committees also. But there was one problem. He was too under the influence of Napoleon. Though they speak at cross purposes, yet he has somewhere in his heart has acceded to the leadership of Napoleon. He even made pigeons fly out to other animal forms to send out a message that a revolution in the animal form has succeeded, and animals are very happy under the regime of animals. But there was a problem between Napoleon and Snowball. Snowball came up with an idea of the construction of a windmill, which was strongly opposed by Napoleon. And Napoleon gradually consolidated his position. He trained dogs to you can say silence his opponents, and Snowball was accused of helping Mr. Jones getting back his animal form from the animals. So that's why he was kicked out of the Snowball. Before that, Mr. Jones made an abortive attempt to get his animal form or manner form back with the help of the army of his, you can say, his other friends, but he failed in his attempt, and this is known as the Battle of Cowshed, and wherein Snowball fought very bravely, and he got a badge of honor for that also. So Napoleon didn't directly take part in this Battle of Cowshed, but he took the entire claim for that. So Napoleon consolidated his position, and he trained dogs to you can say silence his opponents. Squealer, who is a public relation officers of Napoleon, later on tried to convince the animals that the idea to construct this windmill was originally conceived by Napoleon. Since Snowball is in hand in glove with Mr. Jones, that's why this idea was opposed by Napoleon. Now even Napoleon wants that this windmill should be constructed. And then Napoleon, then the 7 commandments which were painted on the wall of the wall of that animal form, they were tampered with, they were tweaked to suit to the needs of Napoleon or pigs. Napoleon started taking wine. It was prohibited in the commandments, but he started taking wine, and they tweaked it that it has been written that nobody will take wine in excess. Okay, so and then he started wearing the clothes of Mr. Jones, and started making merry. And then there was one commandment in which it was written that animals won't establish any trade relations with the human beings. But Napoleon sanctioned even trade relations with human beings. He sold timber to Mr. Frederick, and Mr. Frederick, who's the owner of another animal form or a neighboring animal form, and he even asked the hens to surrender their eggs so that they should be sold to human beings, and material to construct this windmill should be should be purchased by earning money from selling their eggs to human beings. When hens, ducks, and even a few pigs questioned the policies and programs of Napoleon, they were liquidated, they were killed just to silence them. And when Boxer, when he was injured in the Battle of Windmill, again the second attempt was made by Jones to get his animal form back, and that was known as the Battle of Windmill, in which Boxer fought with great valor. But when Boxer gets injured, he was sent to a slaughterhouse. Instead of sending him to a hospital, he was sent to a slaughterhouse, and the money that Napoleon got from selling Boxer to a butcher is used to purchase whiskey. Okay, so in the end, what happened? Napoleon started dining and wining with the pigs. He established very strong relations with human beings. So the ideals on which this revolution took place, they were compromised, they were blatantly ignored, and they were lost. So the idea is that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this idea has been reiterated in the story again and again, and this is a political star. Political star simply means that it makes fun of the politicians and the political institutions, which you can say do nothing for the common masses, but engage themselves in such a way that they should promote their own interests. And this is what happened in the animal form. Now, Napoleon is represented in Stalin. Napoleon is a metaphor for Stalin. After Russian Revolution, Stalin became the head of the Russia, and when he became the head of the government of Russia, he started consolidating his position, and those who were opposed to his policies and programs, they were either killed or driven out of Russia. This snowball basically represents Trotsky. Trotsky is a wise leader, and who is opposed to the policies of Stalin, and that's why he was driven out of Russia. So in this way, we can say, if you trace the history of Russian Revolution and read this novel as a political star, or something, or a book that attacks those politicians who promises moon to the public, but in reality they do nothing for them and promote their own interest. So another idea that the writer tries to convey in this novel is that no revolution can succeed unless there is a correspondent change in human heart. Unless people dump their greed, revolution cannot succeed, and the lot of the people cannot be improved. So these vital questions have been answered in this novella. So we have to know a little bit of Russian Revolution, the philosophy of Marx, and who's who in the novel. That will be taken up in another video. Who's who in the novel, that I will explain in another video in detail. So till now, you watch this video. See you again very soon. Thank you very much.